Hey y'all, Sailor M591 here. This has nothing to do with the video. The video is going to be about making a soda can stove with a wick. But this is a shout out to another YouTuber called Jim Pankey. Jim teaches banjo and he tends to look a lot like this on his YouTube channel. So if you get a chance, check him out. Hey Jim, hope you enjoy it. Anyway, I'm going to set this up and I'll be back and we'll talk about what we're really here to talk about. Okay, we're back. So just to reintroduce myself, Sailor M591 here. This is my first YouTube video. I'm going to give you just a little quick background on me, try to keep it short. I started backpacking in the mid-70s, dropped out of it in the early 80s, got back into it about 10 years ago. Now, in between now and then, I started to see the need to make some 72-hour emergency packs for myself and my family. And one of the things I wanted to do with that was to create cook kits for everyone so they'd have their own, so if they had to, they could make a meal. And to do that, then I needed some cheap way to do that because I had 3 kids. And so I came up with a cook kit with some alcohol penny stoves and some stands I made. And that worked really good, except that my kids were junior high elementary age. And as you know, penny stoves, you have to self-prime them, or you have to prime them. You have to spill a little bit of alcohol to get them hot so that they'll actually work. Kids, not such a good idea. So I came up with a different idea, and that came across this design, which is a double wall design on a soda can stove. And you just put the alcohol in the center, light it, and it self-primes. And that seemed a lot safer. Especially with the kids, and it worked out pretty well. The problem is I'm something of a gear geek, and so once I started making these things, it became a little addictive, and then I started to want to see, well, is there a better way to do this, and how long does it take to make stuff work and boil, and and things like that. And then I bought some commercially available stoves like this Trangia and also Esbit and some others, and one of the things I noticed was that this stove would light up a lot faster than the homemade stoves, and I wasn't sure why. So later I saw a video by Hiram Cook, and I've posted a link down below to this video where he actually cut open a Trangia and showed what was inside, and what was inside was a wick. And so it made me start to wonder if we could improve the performance of a homemade soda can stove by putting a wick in it. So here we are, and here's what we're going to be talking about. So I've already made 2 of them. This first stove has nothing in it. It's just the plain soda can stove wall on the outside, soda can stove inner wall, air in between, and there's that. And then this second stove, I put a piece of fiberglass wick in it, similar to this. Just looped it around and stuck it inside before I closed it up, which would be more comparable to the Trangia. Then I also had some of this carbon fiber mat here that I had laying around, and I thought, well, this might be fun to make a third stove and use the carbon fiber felt as the wick for that. And so today, we're going to make that third stove. So you're going to learn how to make this design stove, and then we'll put the carbon fiber mat in it. Now, a couple things about this. To try to make it comparable, and that's a relative term, I've designed the stoves so they're roughly the same height to the jets of the Trangia. Now, obviously, as you can see, there's quite a bit of difference between these 2 stoves, and that's about as comparable as we're going to get. This is made out of brass. This is made out of aluminum. This has got a different shape to it. It's got a bigger capacity for fuel. But in terms of the distance from the alcohol we put in to the wick, to the jets, and then later when we do some testing on how long it takes to boil water, which one's more efficient, the jets will be about the same distance from the bottom of the pot, so we'll have a rough comparison there. So hopefully you'll find this interesting, and with that, let's get started. So the first thing to do is we need to mark out around this area here where the jets are going to go, and then we need to cut out this piece right here to create the top of the stove. Now, to make this easier for me, I've created some wood blocks here that are the size that I want, so that I can simply push it up and mark it here. And the top of the stove is 1 3/8 inches tall, and the base of the stove is just 1 1/8 inches tall. Now, you can, again, do this any way you want. This is just kind of expedient for me to do this. To mark a line around the rim, I need something I can kind of hold this up against and just turn it. And so if I just set it like that, that seems to hold it pretty well. And then I just take a Sharpie marker and I place it. I'm kind of using this screw as a anchor point. I place it somewhere about the middle, and then I just rotate the can. There. And so now I've got a pretty even mark around the rim. Not perfect, but close enough. Now, the next thing is, where do we place the jets? Now, you can freehand this and it will work out fine. You can put a mark, here at the bottom and then here at the top, so you cut it in half and then cut it into quarters and then, into eighths. And then again, one more time, and you end up with 16 jets. You can do that. It'll be fairly evenly spaced. It doesn't have to be precise. If you want it real close together, there's another way to do that. And to do that, you just need a piece of graph paper. And to fit around a standard soda can, it needs to be 8 1/4 inches. And you simply take and fold it in half, and then fold it again so that you have it now quartered. If you fold it again, you now have 8, and if you fold it again, you now have 16. Then all you have to do is tape these edges together, and it's easy to do. Just line it up like that, put a piece of tape over the edge, and then you have a sleeve, which I've already made, which is right here. Now, one thing to help make it easy to see where you need to put the marks is it helps to take the highlighter or a little Sharpie marker and kind of mark the edge where the fold is, and that way you can visualize where they go. All you do then is slip that over the top, and wherever you see the mark, simply make a mark corresponding that intersects that line. And when you get done, you'll have 16 evenly spaced marks, which is where your jets will go. And there we go. So now we've got 16 pretty evenly spaced marks around it. Now, to drill or to make the jets, you can use just a push pin and simply push it in. I use a drill, and I use a 1/16 drill bit to do that. Why 1/16? It's the smallest drill bit I have. If you have a smaller one, a 32nd, you can use that. It's fine. Again, it's not hard and fast rules, but a 1/16 works pretty well. Makes a pretty decent flame. Now, before I drill the hole, I want to cut this centerpiece out, mostly because I just want as much structural integrity as I can for this step. And to do that, I use this hook blade knife. Now, why do I use this? It was in my toolbox. You can certainly use just a utility knife like this, or you could even use a pocket knife. Anything with an edge will work. But I find that this hook blade lets me put a fair amount of pressure at the angle, and I can keep my finger on this and push down, and so it just seems to work really well for me. If you don't have one of these, I wouldn't go out and buy it, but I had it, so I use it. But simply, all I do is I just start scoring a line here at the bottom, and I want to do it, I want to leave this ridge here because that's where the inner wall is going to connect up under there and seal off. So I want to leave this like that. And I'm just doing it this way because it keeps my hand out of the way. Okay, and now it's broken through. All right, so now we're just going to drill the holes out. And there we go. So now we've got the center wall cut out, or I'm sorry, the opening cut out, and we've got the 16 jets. Now this edge is a little rough, and so to kind of smooth that down, I'll take a pair of needle nose pliers and just kind of work it around. And just smooth that off a little bit so it's not quite so rough. Now, the only thing left to do is to remove this part from the rest of the can. Again, we want this part to be 1 3/8 inches tall. So simply line it up like that and begin to rotate it up against this blade, which will score a line. Okay, so we scored a line, and that just kind of fatigued the metal, and you can see now how it's just separating right at that line, which is exactly what I want to do. And you get this nice clean edge, like that. And so now we have our top. Now, the problem is, of course, the bottom is going to be made from this can, and it is exactly the same diameter. Which brings us to this can of mellow yellow. So what I want to do is I want to use this to stretch out this aluminum a little bit. So to do that, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to slip it kind of over the top and force it on just a little bit. And I'm going to rotate it a little bit more, force it on a little bit. Just kind of work my way around doing that to slowly stretch this out. Again, you want to be careful because this is fairly thin material. You see it from that angle, so I'm just kind of pushing it on, slipping it off, rotating it a little bit, pushing it on, slipping it off, pushing it on. Now, if you force this too much too fast, it will split, and then you get to start all over again. And that's about all we need to do with that. The other step now is to cut the bottom off of this can, which we don't have to do anything for. Okay. Just like before. So all I'm doing is just fatiguing along that scoring line right now. I'm not trying to force anything because it will tear and leave a ragged edge, and I really don't want to do that. So I just gently work this line there. And it will start to follow the scoring line. There we go. Now, this still doesn't want to slip over this real easily. And I need to make the inner wall. So there's two things I'm going to do. I'm going to make the inner diameter of this slightly smaller by crimping it using my needle nose pliers. So to do that, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to bend it just a little bit and then move over here just a hair and do it again and work my way all the way around. There. So now, this will go together a little easier. The last thing I need to make is this inner wall here. And to do that, I use this to cut against. And I need one of the partial cans and a pair of scissors. So we're just going to cut a line up to the top and then cut our way around. Like so. And that gives us the foil that we will use for the wall. Now, I want this inner wall to be 1 5/8 inches tall. Remember, this is 1 3/8 inches. 1 5/8 inches will make it so that this stops right at the edge of the base. And I just use my combination square here to make a mark. There. And to make a mark here, and then I use this metal ruler to score a line, just like I did with everything else, to give me the height of the wall that I want. And so I just take my utility knife and just score that. And you can see it's already breaking right along the line that I just scored into the metal. There. Now, this is totally optional, but something that I've started to do. I don't know if you can see, but inside here there are 3 marks in the wall. And the first mark is for 1 fluid ounce, the second mark is for 1.5, and the third mark is for 2 fluid ounces, which 2 fluid ounces is about the most you want to put in this stove. So how did I come up with that? Well, basically I took this and put 1 ounce of fluid in here and stuck that down there and went, oh look, and made a mark. Then I put another ½ ounce in and went in and went, oh look, there's a mark. And then I put in 2 ounces and made a mark for 2 ounces. And so now I have where they go. So for this, I just simply line it up somewhere about the middle. And I make a mark. Now, again, this is close. It's approximations. It's not real precise, but it's good enough, as they say, close enough for government work. To make the mark, I just use a stubby screwdriver, and I just place it over it and gently push, because you don't want to pierce through the aluminum. It's rather thin, but I just push down and make a mark. And I can take the edge and just gently pull it, kind of deepen the mark a little bit, make it a little more obvious. Again, gentle pressure, doesn't take a lot. But there, we've got 3 dents basically, right where I want them. That says that this is the, that's the marks. Little hint, remember, this is the top now, that's the bottom. Don't mess that up. And we're done with that. Now we have to make the inner wall. We want it to set right in this groove. We want it to set right in the groove here, so it will correspond to the lip right here. A paper clip is your friend. So I get it situated in that groove. Not too tight, not too loose. And then I clip it together with the paper clip. And that holds everything right where I want it to be. Now then, using the marker, I make a mark right along this, using that paper clip as a guide. And then I make another mark right here on this side of the paper clip. Okay? So these two line up. Actually, it should be the inside right here. So now, I take my scissors and I cut just past the halfway mark, just past it. And then I come back over here and I do the same on the opposite side. So that when I slip these together, it holds it. And it fits right in the ring like it needs to. The next thing I have to do is to create a way for the alcohol to get past this and into this inner chamber. And again, millions of ways to do this. What I do though is I use it as a way to help lock down this extra stuff. Now you can trim this up a little bit if you want. It doesn't matter. Like if you wanted to straighten this up just a hair, you trim that off. Trim that off. That's all fine and good. Just to neaten it up a little bit if you want. But then I just make a little slit, making sure I'm at the right end. This is where you want to make sure that your marks are still at the bottom, because you don't want to do this at the top or you get to make a new inner wall. So I just cut a little bit there and I just bend it up. And what that does is it just kind of holds this together. And then I do the same over here. Try to hold this together a little bit. And this just creates a path for the alcohol to get from the inner chamber into the outer chamber. And then I need to do one more right over here in the middle somewhere. Like that. And now we have made our inner wall. Now all that's left to do is to put it all together. And while I was off camera, I went ahead and cut a piece of carbon felt to 7 1/4 inches by the height of this top, which is 1 3/8 inches. The idea being that when it's in the base, it will be just below the vents, and so it will wick the moisture or the alcohol up close to the vents. So now we just got to get this thing put together. So I'm just going to put the carbon felt inside the can. It is a tight fit because this is kind of thick, and so I found it's easier to do this. Put that in first and then slip the inner sleeve in, kind of working it around and work it down. There we go. So now we've got the carbon felt and the inner sleeve, and now we just have to put this over the top. Thusly. And then we just gently, emphasis on the word gently, begin to work it down. Now it should be a pretty tight fit. And the main thing we want to make sure that happens is we want to make sure that this inner wall catches underneath that lip. I have had the tops split as I'm working it down before, which is really frustrating because you're right there at the end and then it just doesn't want to work right. You don't want to get into a rush with any of this. Because this is the last part, and if it goes bad, then you've just undone all of your work. We are just about there. Okay. And that's done. And that's how you make a soda can stove, or at least one way to make a soda can stove. The only thing left to do now is to test it out and see how it goes. So let's give this thing its inaugural start. You can use heat. You can use denatured alcohol. Heat is generally cheaper than denatured alcohol. A quart and a half, which is a 4-pack of heat, runs about $6. And a quart of the denatured alcohol runs close to $6. So per ounce, the heat is cheaper. We have Rural King around here, and I found this stuff at Rural King, which is the same thing as heat, a 4-pack for $3. Now, they're only 10 fluid ounces each, whereas the heat is 12 fluid ounces, but still, that's about 7.5 cents an ounce. So that's pretty darn cheap. So if you find that, I'd get it. But this stuff works just fine. And I'm just going to put in 1 ounce. I have a suspicion that even though I've made those marks, most of this is going to get wicked up into the felt. And so I'm curious to see how that affects it. So 1 ounce of heat, pour that in. And yeah, it absorbed it all. There is no fluid in that inner chamber whatsoever. I'm going to add a little bit more just to have some fluid in the inner chamber to prime this thing. That is interesting. Boy, it is sucking that right up. So let's see what we get. Let's see if it will even light. No. So we get to add some more. I'm curious to see if this will burn. Now I can feel it getting heavier, so So that carbon felt is just absorbing this. So I guess we've got to saturate that carbon felt. All right, I got some fluid standing, so let's see how we do. I'm going to turn the light out so we can watch. And it's already blooming. You can see it coming around the sides. It's taking its time coming around to this side. There we go. Interesting. I'm going to snuff that out. So this is the stove with no wick in it whatsoever. And I'm just going to put just a little ½ ounce in this. And so you can see the difference in the flame and why I snuffed this one out. It was not even, and it was, in a sense, it was, this cooled off. It was not wanting to start on this side of the stove, and it was actually even spitting alcohol out. So that was a little bothersome, a little worrisome. So this is without any wick whatsoever. And as you can see, it's taking a bit of time for it to bloom because the stove itself has to get hot enough to vaporize the alcohol and create the pressure. And now it's blooming. And the idea of the wick is it just pulls the alcohol up closer to it. That's what it's supposed to look like, as opposed to this. Now you can see it started to bloom right away, but it's not even, and it's spitting out alcohol. So I'm not sure that carbon felt is the answer for a wick in one of these stoves. And you can see that a couple of these jets just don't want to get started. Instead of this nice even flame pattern, it's kind of all over the place. So we're going to call that maybe not such a good idea. I'll come back and we'll do another video that compares against the Trangia, the fiberglass wick, and just the plain stove. But I don't think we're going to do the carbon fiber stove. That just doesn't look quite right to me. This is Sailor M591, and we'll catch you next time around.